My husband texted, "I'll be late. Don't call me. I found someone who actually understands me." I replied, "Then stay with her. Don't come back." 15 minutes later, 50 missed calls. Funny how the man who thought I'd fall apart without him started panicking when I finally stopped waiting. "I'll be late. Don't call me. I found someone who actually understands me." I stared at Miles's text on my phone screen, standing in the hospital break room after a 12-hour shift. My scrubs were still damp with sweat from CPR on a patient who didn't make it. My hands, steady enough to restart hearts, trembled holding the phone. 10 years of marriage and he chose these 20 words to end it. Not even worth a phone call. I set down my coffee still full and typed back, "Then stay with her. Don't come back." Before we continue, if you've ever felt unseen in your own marriage, please consider subscribing. It's free and helps us reach more women who need to know they're not alone. The break room's fluorescent lights hummed above me. Someone's leftover birthday cake sat in an open box on the counter, pink frosting wilting under the harsh light. "Happy birthday, Jennifer," it read. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, witnessing the death of my marriage next to someone else's celebration. But the strange thing was, I didn't cry. Didn't scream. Didn't throw my phone against the wall like they do in movies. Instead, I walked to the sink and washed my hands, the water scalding hot, watching the day wash down the drain. Mr. Rodriguez hadn't made it through surgery. Neither had my marriage. At least Mr. Rodriguez had fought to stay. That Sunday morning just 4 days ago, I'd made Miles's coffee exactly how he liked it. 2 sugars, oat milk in his special mug from that conference in Denver. He'd sat at our kitchen table scrolling through his phone, thumb moving in that mindless pattern I'd memorized over the years. When I'd set the mug down, he'd lifted his face for our morning kiss. A reflex. Nothing more. His lips had been dry, distracted, already somewhere else. "Emergency client meeting," he'd said, not looking up from the screen. "Might run late." I'd wanted to ask which client had emergencies on Sundays. Instead, I just nodded and watched him leave, his wedding ring sitting on the counter where he'd forgotten it. "Third time that week. It interferes with typing," he'd explained once, showing me the tiny indentation on his finger as proof of his dedication to work. Caroline, my charge nurse, poked her head into the break room. "You okay? You've been in here 20 minutes. 20 minutes. I'd been standing at this sink for 20 minutes, reading and rereading those 20 words. Perfect symmetry. "I'm fine," I said, drying my hands on the rough paper towels that left my skin raw. "Just needed a moment." She studied my face with that nurse's intuition we all developed, the ability to spot pain that patients tried to hide. "Take your time. We're covered out there." The truth was, I'd seen this coming for months, maybe longer. It started with small things. He'd stopped asking about my day. Stopped noticing when I'd worked doubles. Started mentioning Julia from his consulting firm in that casual way people do when they're trying not to sound interested. Julia had this brilliant idea about the Peterson account. Julia stayed late to help with the presentation. Julia really understands the vision. Julia. Even her name sounded like someone who had time for yoga classes and wine tastings, not someone who came home with other people's blood under her fingernails. 6 months ago, when Miles got promoted to senior partner, we'd gone to that expensive steakhouse downtown to celebrate. I'd worn the black dress he'd bought me for our anniversary, the one that made me feel like someone other than an exhausted nurse. But he'd spent the entire dinner texting, his face illuminated by his phone screen, smiling at messages I couldn't see. "Who's that?" I'd asked, trying to sound casual. "Julia. She's congratulating me. She really gets how hard I've worked for this." He gets it. He understands. The words had lodged in my chest like shrapnel. When had I stopped understanding him? Or had he just stopped letting me? I pulled my phone out again, scrolling up through our text history. Mundane exchanges about grocery lists and bill payments. His messages getting shorter over time. Mine trying harder. The last real conversation we'd had over text was 3 weeks ago when I'd sent him a photo from our trip to the coast 5 years ago. "Remember this?" I'd written. He'd responded with a thumbs up emoji. A thumbs up for 5 years of memories. Our friends thought we had the perfect marriage. My mother still called us her favorite couple, which was cruel considering I was her only child. Last month at book club, Susan had actually said, "You're so lucky Miles is so devoted. Dave hasn't planned a date night in years." I'd smiled and sipped my wine, not mentioning that Miles hadn't planned anything either. That our last date night had been me eating takeout alone while he worked late. That I'd started volunteering for overnight shifts just to avoid the echoing silence of our apartment. The break room door opened again. This time it was Angela from pediatrics, grabbing her lunch from the fridge. "Rough night?" she asked, noticing my face. "Mr. Rodriguez didn't make it," I said, which was true but not the whole truth. She squeezed my shoulder. "I'm sorry. It never gets easier." "Oh, it doesn't. Death never gets easier. Not the sudden ones that shock you and not the slow ones you see coming from miles away. Not in the cardiac unit and not in marriages that flatline while you're still trying to resurrect them." I looked at my phone one more time. No follow-up text. No, I didn't mean it. No, let's talk. Just those 20 words hanging between us like a diagnosis nobody wanted to hear. Terminal. Inoperable. Nothing more we can do. The coffee I'd abandoned had gone cold, a film forming on its surface. I poured it down the sink and watched it spiral away. 10 years. 3,650 days, give or take. And it ended with a text sent while I was trying to save someone else's life. I walked back onto the floor, my white sneakers squeaking against the linoleum, the familiar rhythm of the cardiac unit welcoming me back. Monitors beeping. Ventilators whooshing. Hearts fighting to keep beating. Mine had already stopped. I just hadn't realized it until tonight. The rest of my shift blurred into controlled chaos. Mrs. Chin in room 302 coded at 11:30. Her family had been fighting us all day about her DNR status, insisting their mother would want everything done, despite the paperwork saying otherwise. I performed compressions on her fragile chest, feeling ribs crack under my palms while her daughter screamed at me to try harder. We got her back after 18 minutes. She lasted another hour before coding again. The second time her son grabbed my arm. "You're not trying hard enough. You gave up on her." I wanted to tell him that sometimes trying harder meant knowing when to stop. That his mother's heart was tired. That she was ready even if he wasn't. Instead, I gently removed his hand and called for security. They escorted him to the waiting room while his mother died for the third and final time, peacefully without an audience. By the time I reached the break room at 9 that night, my scrubs looked like I'd been in a war zone. Blood from Mrs. Chen's arterial line had sprayed across my chest when it came loose during compressions. My feet ached in my worn sneakers. My lower back screamed from hours of bending over beds, adjusting monitors, holding the hands of people afraid to let go. Caroline caught me at the coffee machine. "Adeline, we need to talk." I knew what was coming. She'd been watching me for weeks, noting every extra shift I'd grabbed, every holiday I'd volunteered for, every weekend I'd spent here instead of home. "You've worked 6 doubles this month," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "That's not sustainable." "I'm fine. I need the money. We're saving for..." I stopped. What were we saving for? The vacation Miles kept postponing? The house he said we couldn't afford yet despite his promotion? "Honey, I've been doing this for 20 years. I know when someone's running from something." I forced a laugh. "Running? I'm barely walking after today." She didn't smile. "Is everything okay at home?" The question hung between us. 3 months ago I would have said yes automatically. 2 months ago I might have hesitated. Tonight, standing there covered in someone else's blood, exhausted beyond measure, I couldn't even pretend. "I should check on my patients," I said. Caroline's hand touched my shoulder. "The offer stands. If you need to talk." I nodded and escaped to the break room. The space was empty, just me and the vending machine's eternal hum. I collapsed into a plastic chair and pulled out my phone to text Miles that I'd be late. That's when I saw his message sent 3 minutes ago. "I'll be late. Don't call me. I found someone who actually understands me." The words didn't register at first. I read them the way you'd read medication dosages or lab results. Clinically. Detached. Then my brain caught up and each word detonated in sequence. Found. Someone. Who. Actually. Understands. Me. The vending machine's hum grew louder, or maybe that was the blood rushing in my ears. The fluorescent light above me flickered, casting shadows that danced across the grimy floor. Someone had left a medical journal on the table, open to an article about cardiac arrhythmias. The irony of reading about irregular heartbeats while mine forgot how to function normally. My hands weren't shaking when I typed my response. That surprised me. These hands that had trembled trying to save Mrs. Chin, that shook when her son accused me of not caring enough, were absolutely steady as I wrote. Then stay with her. Don't come back. I hit send and set the phone face down on the table. The vending machine continued its mechanical breathing. Like a ventilator keeping something alive that should have been allowed to die with dignity. I stood up and walked to the bathroom where I caught my reflection in the harsh mirror. Blood on my scrubs. Bags under my eyes. Hair escaping from the ponytail I'd tied at 6 this morning. But my face was calm. Resolved. Like I'd just made a critical medical decision that everyone else was too emotional to make. Back in the break room, I turned off my phone completely and shoved it in my locker. Then I walked back onto the floor. Everything okay? Angela asked, passing me in the hallway. Perfect, I said and meant it. The next 3 hours should have dragged. Should have been torture. Instead, they flew by with crystalline clarity. I updated charts with unprecedented focus. Administered medications with Zen-like precision. When Mr. Patterson in 308 complained about his pain management, I adjusted his dosage without the usual internal debate about drug-seeking behavior. When the new nurse fumbled with an 4 insertion, I guided her hands with patience I didn't know I possessed. At midnight, Caroline found me reorganizing the supply closet. What are you doing? Inventory. The morning shift always complains they can't find anything. She leaned against the doorframe. You've been different tonight, Plumber. Which terrifies me more than if you were falling apart. I lined up boxes of gauze with military precision. Maybe I finally figured something out. Want to share with the class? I turned to face her. You know what the hardest part of this job is? It's not the death. It's not the families who blame us. It's not even the 12-hour shifts. It's going home to someone who doesn't understand why we do it. Who doesn't get why we stay late to hold someone's hand, why we cry in our cars after losing a patient, why we come back day after day even when it breaks us. Caroline's expression softened. Oh, honey. I'm not looking for sympathy, I said, turning back to the supplies. I'm just saying I finally understand something. You can't make someone understand you. They either do or they don't. And if they don't? I shrugged. Well, forcing it is like performing CPR on someone who's been down for an hour. You're just breaking ribs for no reason. She watched me work for another moment. You need to go home. After inventory. Adeline. I'll leave at 1. Promise. She left, but not before squeezing my shoulder again. That small gesture of understanding meant more than 10 years of Miles asking, "How was your day?" without listening to the answer. At 12:45 I finished the closet. Every supply in its place. Every label facing forward. Order from chaos. Control where I could find it. I changed out of my bloody scrubs in the locker room, stuffing them in a biohazard bag with unusual satisfaction. The blood wasn't mine. The pain wasn't mine. For once, the tragedy belonged to someone else. My phone stayed off in my locker. Whatever messages were waiting could wait forever. The parking garage elevator smelled like stale cigarettes and disappointment. I clutched my bag, still wearing the hospital sneakers that squeaked against the metal floor, and watched the numbers descend. B1. B2. B3. My car sat exactly where I'd left it 14 hours ago, back when I still had a marriage. The engine turned over on the 3rd try. I should have gotten it serviced weeks ago, but Miles always handled the cars. Another thing I'd need to figure out on my own. The thought should have scared me. Instead, I felt oddly excited, like I'd been handed a permission slip to become someone new. Portland at midnight looked different when you were driving toward freedom instead of home. The streets glistened from earlier rain, neon signs reflected in puddles like watercolors bleeding together. I passed the coffee shop where Miles and I had our first date, the bookstore where we'd spent Sunday afternoons before Sunday became his permanent workday, the bar where we'd celebrated our last anniversary. 6 months ago. He'd left early to handle a crisis. Of course. The 24-hour Safeway appeared like an oasis. I parked crooked across 2 spaces because I could. Because there was no one to comment on my driving. Because small rebellions felt necessary tonight. The fluorescent lights inside made everyone look sick, or maybe that was just me catching my reflection in the automatic doors. I grabbed a cart even though I only needed 2 things. The expensive Pinot Noir we'd been saving for a special occasion sat on the top shelf, dusty and patient. $48 for a bottle of wine seemed insane 6 hours ago. Now it felt like a bargain for celebrating my independence. The ice cream aisle stretched before me like a frozen promise. Miles hated mint chocolate chip. Called it toothpaste flavored. I grabbed 2 pints. Then the coffee ice cream he said was too bitter. The strawberry cheesecake he deemed too sweet. My cart became a monument to everything I'd given up for the sake of compromise. The checker, a kid with gauged ears and tired eyes, scanned my items without comment. Long night, he asked. The best kind, I said, surprising us both. The drive to our apartment. My apartment, I corrected mentally, took 12 minutes. I counted everyone, aware that this was the last time I'd make this journey as a married woman pretending everything was fine. Tomorrow I'd drive it as someone else. Someone who bought mint chocolate chip ice cream at midnight and didn't apologize. Our building's parking garage was empty except for the usual suspects. Mr. Kim's ancient Honda. The red Tesla belonging to the tech couple on the 4th floor. Miles's spot sat vacant, his absence so routine it had stopped registering months ago. I took the stairs instead of the elevator, needing to feel my body move, to prove I was still capable of forward motion. 4th floor. My keys felt heavier than usual, weighted with the knowledge that I was about to enter a space that was mine to reshape. The apartment was dark, exactly as I'd left it this morning. No lights left on for my return. No note on the counter. No evidence that anyone had been waiting or worried. The silence felt different though. Before it had been oppressive, full of everything unsaid. Now it felt expectant, like the pause before a song begins. I flipped on every light switch, flooding the space with brightness Miles would have called wasteful. The living room came alive and suddenly I saw everything clearly. The gray couch I'd picked while he was at a conference. The abstract painting he'd said looked like someone sneezed paint, but I'd bought anyway, hanging it when he was traveling. The bookshelf full of my medical journals and his unread business books. Our interests segregated like divorced parents' weekends. My phone sat silent in my bag. I knew I should turn it on. Face whatever avalanche of messages waited. Instead, I opened the wine first, not bothering with the special aerator Miles had insisted we needed. It tasted like rebellion and relief. I walked through each room, wine glass in hand, seeing our life together for what it really was. The guest room he'd turned into an office where he spent most evenings. The bathroom with his expensive cologne collection and my drugstore shampoo. The bedroom with the California king bed that had felt crowded even when he was traveling. Finally, standing on our small balcony overlooking the city, I pulled out my phone. My finger hesitated over the power button. Once I turned it on, this became real. The text, my response, the ending, all of it would be waiting there in digital permanence. I pressed the button. The screen came alive at exactly 10:47 p.m. For 3 seconds nothing happened. Then the avalanche began. Missed call from Miles. Missed call from Miles. Missed call from Miles. The notifications stacked so fast I couldn't read them individually. My phone vibrated continuously like it was having a seizure. 53 missed calls. 28 text messages. 6 voicemails. All from him. I scrolled through the texts, each one a stage of grief in real time. That came out wrong. I didn't mean it like that. Adeline, please call me. This is ridiculous. You're overreacting. We need to talk about this. Where are you? I know you're seeing this. This is insane. You can't just end our marriage over a text. Answer your phone. Please. I'm sorry. It's not what you think. Julia means nothing. I'm coming home. Where are you? This isn't like you. You're scaring me. Adeline, please. I love you. I read that last one aloud to the Portland skyline. I love you. 3 words that would have meant everything this morning. Now they felt like counterfeit bills, worthless and insulting. Between Miles's desperate messages, I found 3 from Sophie. Miles just called me. Are you okay? Adeline, what's happening? He sounds frantic. Call me. No judgment. Just worried. I typed back. Better than okay. He chose to stay late with someone who understands him. I just made it permanent. Open that Malbec you've been saving. We're celebrating tomorrow. Her response was immediate. Holy. Yes. Wine, tissues, and bail money ready if needed. I laughed, actually laughed, standing alone on my balcony at nearly 11 at night. The city spread below me, thousands of lights and thousands of windows, each one a life being lived. How many of them were in marriages like mine? How many were standing on balconies, reading desperate texts from spouses who'd only discovered they cared when it was too late? My phone rang. Miles again. I watched his contact photo fill the screen. Us at the coast, both squinting into the sun, his arm around me like he actually wanted it there. I let it ring through to voicemail, then deleted it without listening. The wine tasted better with each sip. The city lights blurred slightly, whether from tears or alcohol I couldn't tell. Didn't care. I raised my glass to Portland, to the strangers in their lit windows, to the girl with gauged ears at Safeway, to Caroline who'd known something was wrong, to Mrs. Chin who'd fought until she couldn't, to Sophie who had bail money ready. To understanding ourselves, I said to no one, to everyone. Since that's all we can really control. My phone lit up again. Another call from Miles. Number 54. I turned it face down on the balcony table and went inside to eat mint chocolate chip ice cream straight from the pint, finally understanding what freedom tasted like. The mint chocolate chip ice cream had melted into soup by the time I finally went to bed. I left the pint on the coffee table, a small rebellion against Miles's rules about food in the living room. At 6 a.m., my alarm didn't go off because I'd never fallen asleep. Instead of exhaustion, I felt wired, electric, like my body had discovered a new energy source powered by pure determination. I called the hospital at 7, listening to the phone ring while making coffee in the French press Miles never used because it was too much work. Cardiac unit, this is Angela. It's Adeline. I need to call in sick today. Pause. I never called in sick. 3 years without a single absence, through flu seasons and food poisoning and the time I threw out my back moving Miles's exercise equipment he never used. Are you okay? You seemed different last night. I'm perfect. Just have some personal matters to handle. Oh. Another pause. Caroline mentioned you might need some time. Take care of yourself, okay? I hung up and dialed the bank next. While waiting on hold, I slipped my wedding ring off my left hand and moved it to my right. The indentation it left behind looked like a scar that would fade with time. Washington Federal, this is Cheryl. How can I help you today? I need to separate a joint account. Cheryl's voice shifted to that careful tone people use for delicate situations. I can help you with that. Will both account holders be present? No. Just me. 20 minutes later, I walked into the branch downtown. Cheryl turned out to be a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and perfectly manicured nails. She didn't comment on my wrinkled clothes from yesterday or the fact that I was separating finances at 9 in the morning on a Thursday. How would you like to divide the funds? She asked, fingers poised over her keyboard. Exactly half. I'm not trying to be vindictive. She nodded and started typing. The numbers on her screen made me realize how much we'd saved while never spending money on anything that brought joy. No vacations because Miles was always too busy. No concerts because he found live music chaotic. No nice dinners because he preferred to network at work events I wasn't invited to. Will you be needing new checks? Everything new, I said. New account, new cards, new everything. He smiled then just slightly. Fresh start. The freshest. By 10:30 I was back at the apartment with a new bank account, temporary checks with only my name, and the phone number for Tommy the locksmith that Cheryl had discreetly written on a post-it note. My nephew, she'd explained. He's helped a lot of my friends with transitions. Tommy arrived in a van that had Fresh Start locks painted on the side, which felt too on the nose to be real, but there it was. Miss Crawford. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe 30, with tattoo sleeves and a tool belt that looked like it meant business. That's me. He studied the existing locks with professional interest. Boyfriend trouble? Husband trouble. Soon-to-be ex-husband trouble. Ah. He started unpacking his tools. You'd be surprised how many calls I get on Thursdays. Something about Thursdays makes people realize they deserve better. While he worked, he told me stories. The woman who changed her locks after finding her husband's dating profile still active. The man who discovered his wife's affair through their shared Netflix account. The couple who changed each other's locks on the same day and had to meet in the hallway to laugh about it. You seem pretty calm about all this, he observed, installing the third deadbolt. I work in cardiac. Once you've restarted someone's heart with your bare hands, changing locks doesn't seem that dramatic. Fair point. He tested the new key, the lock clicking with satisfying finality. You want all the copies? Every single one. He handed me 4 keys on a ring. These locks are pick-proof, bump-proof and X-proof. That last one's not technically an industry term, but it should be. After Tommy left, I stood in the middle of the apartment with my new keys, surveying what needed to be done. Miles's presence was everywhere but also nowhere. His things were here, but when had he last been present? I started with his office. Investment magazines he subscribed to but never read. Awards from his company that all looked the same. The standing desk he'd insisted on buying then never used, preferring to work from bed or the couch. Each item went into boxes I'd gotten from the liquor store, their previous contents more honest about their purpose than anything of Miles's. His watches came next. 6 of them, each more expensive than the last, each worn maybe twice. The Rolex his father gave him that he said was too formal. The smartwatch that was too casual. The vintage Omega he bought to celebrate his promotion, worn once to show it off then abandoned. In the bedroom his suits hung like expensive ghosts. I folded each one properly, the way they taught us to handle patient belongings. With respect for what they were, not what they meant. His ties, color-coordinated and barely touched. His shoes, polished and lined up like soldiers who'd never seen battle. The bathroom took the longest. His skincare routine that cost more than my monthly student loan payment. Cologne bottles arranged by season, though he always wore the same one. The electric toothbrush he'd upgraded 3 times in 2 years, always seeking the perfect clean for his perfect smile. I found things I'd forgotten existed. The anniversary card I'd given him last year, still in its envelope, unopened. A photo from our honeymoon shoved behind his hair products. The watch I'd saved for months to buy him for his 30th birthday, still in its box with the tags on. By 2 o'clock, 11 boxes stood by the door like cardboard testimony to a marriage that had been over long before last night. I'd just been the only one still trying to resuscitate it. My phone rang. The doorman's extension. Miss Crawford. Marcus's voice was professionally neutral, but I heard the question in it. Mr. Bennett is here. His key fob seems to be malfunctioning. I could hear Miles in the background, his voice sharp with frustration. It's not malfunctioning, something's wrong with the system. The system is working perfectly, I told Marcus. His access has been revoked. His belongings are packed by the door. Could you help him load them? Boss. Of course, Miss Crawford. Oh, and Marcus? It's Miss Crawford permanently now. Understood, Miss Crawford. I'll make a note in the system. I hung up and stood there staring at the boxes by the door. Through the intercom I could hear the elevator arriving, Marcus's professional murmur, and then Miles's voice, sharp and escalating. My phone rang immediately. Adeline, what the hell is this? His voice crackled through the speaker, cycling between fury and something that sounded almost like fear. Hello, Miles. I walked to the kitchen needing something to do with my hands. Started washing the coffee mug from this morning, the French press he'd never learned to use. The locks? The boxes? Are you having some kind of breakdown? No, I said, drying the mug with meticulous care. I'm having a breakthrough. There's a difference. This is insane. You're being completely irrational. Over one text. I set the mug in the cabinet, aligning it perfectly with the others. Not one text, Miles. One honest text. After years of dishonest everything else. I don't even know what that means. It means you finally told me the truth. You found someone who understands you. Julia, right? From your firm. Silence. Then defensive. Julia is a colleague. We work on projects together. Projects. I laughed, but it came out bitter. Is that what we're calling it now? Nothing happened. Yet. Nothing happened yet. But you wanted it to. You've been wanting it to for months. Every mention of her brilliant ideas, her innovative strategies, how she gets your vision. You've been having an emotional affair, Miles, whether you touched her or not. That's not, you're twisting things. I'm clarifying things. You said you found someone who understands you. Present tense. Found. Not might find, or could find. You already found her. I'm just stepping aside so you can pursue that understanding without me in the way. I heard him breathing heavily through the phone. In the background, Marcus was loading boxes into the elevator, each thud another piece of our marriage being removed. Where am I supposed to go? His voice had gotten smaller, the anger deflating into something else. To Julius? Your brothers? That extended stay hotel you used for all those client emergencies? I don't know, Miles. But it's not my problem to solve anymore. You're my wife. I was your wife. Now I'm the woman respecting your need to be understood by someone else. He hung up. 20 seconds later he called back. We need to talk about this in person. No, we don't. You can't just end 10 years over. You ended it, Miles. I'm just handling the logistics. This time when he hung up he didn't call back immediately. I stood in my quiet kitchen, afternoon light streaming through windows he'd wanted to cover with blackout curtains. The peace felt surreal, like the calm after a tornado when you're checking if you still have all your limbs. At midnight my phone buzzed. Not Miles this time. An unknown number with a wall of text. Hi Adeline, this is Julia from Miles's firm. I want you to know that nothing physical has happened between us. We've had some deep conversations about work and life, but I would never cross that line with a married man. There's been an emotional connection, yes, and maybe some feelings developed that shouldn't have, but I swear we haven't acted on anything. Miles is devoted to you. He talks about you all the time. These late nights have just been about the Morrison project, mostly. Okay, sometimes we talked about other things. Personal things. But that's normal for colleagues who spend time together. I think you're misunderstanding our professional chemistry. Can we talk woman to woman? I never meant for any of this. I read it 3 times. Each read revealed more. Nothing physical meant they'd thought about it. Feelings developed, confirmed what I already knew. Talks about you all the time was past tense and probably complaints. Professional chemistry was just another term for emotional affair. I didn't respond. The next morning my phone rang at 7:30. Miles's mother, Margaret, calling from Scottsdale, where she lived in a retirement community that cost more than most people's mortgages. Adeline, sweetheart, what is this nonsense I'm hearing? Good morning, Margaret. Miles called me at midnight, hysterical. Says you've locked him out? Changed the banks. This is not how marriages work. I almost laughed. Margaret on her 3rd husband lecturing me about how marriages work. Miles found someone who understands him better. I'm respecting that choice. Men say stupid things when they're stressed. You can't take every word literally. Actually, I can. And I am. You're giving up so easily. After everything you've built together. What did we build, Margaret? Really? A life where he works 18-hour days and I eat dinner alone? Where he spends more time with Julia from his office than with me? That's not a marriage. That's just 2 people with the same address. Her voice cracked slightly. Who's going to take care of him? He's 37 years old. He makes $200,000 a year. I think he'll figure it out. But his anxiety, are not my responsibility anymore. She hung up on me, which felt like a family tradition at this point. 2 hours later, Sophie arrived with what she called her emergency divorce kit. 2 bottles of wine, fancy chocolate, tissues, and her tablet loaded with apartment listings. She found me on a ladder, painting the accent wall coral. Okay, this is not what I expected, she said, setting down her supplies. What did you expect? Crying? Bed wallowing? Maybe some therapeutic plate smashing? I did my crying in increments over the past year. Every time he chose work over us. Every time he mentioned Julia. Every time I ate dinner alone. I'm all cried out. She watched me paint steady strokes covering the beige Miles had insisted was calming. You know what, she said finally. I never liked him. I nearly dropped the brush. What? He was condescending. Remember at your birthday dinner when he corrected the wine pronunciation? Or when he explained your own job to you at the Christmas party? He was exhausting to be around. We all thought it, but you seemed, I don't know, committed to making it work. Committed to being blind, more like. No. Committed to your vows. There's a difference between giving up and knowing when to stop. You knew when to stop. She helped me finish the wall, both of us splattered with coral drops that looked like celebratory confetti. The color transformed the room, made it warm where it had been cold, alive where it had been sterile. He's going to come back, Sophie said, washing paint off her hands. Men like Miles always do. When Julia realizes he's actually available, she'll run. When he has to do his own laundry and cooking and emotional labor, he'll come crawling back. Maybe, I said, stepping back to admire the wall. But I won't be here. Not in the way he needs me to be. Sophie left that evening after helping me move the furniture, creating a space that finally felt like mine. I was admiring the coral wall, now dry and vibrant, when the doorbell rang at 8:30. Through the peephole I saw Miles's brother David looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. "David," I said, opening the door but not moving aside. "Let me guess. Emergency intervention." He shifted his messenger bag, the same one he'd carried since college. "Can I come in? I flew down from Seattle." "You flew down from Seattle for Miles, not for me." "Adeline, please. Just hear me out." Against my better judgment I let him in. He stopped short at the coral wall, the rearranged furniture, the absence of Miles's things. "Wow. You've already..." He trailed off, sitting gingerly on my new throw pillows like they might explode. "Coffee?" I asked, moving to the kitchen. "Please." I made it in the French press, using the cheerful yellow mugs Miles had relegated to the back of the cabinet. David pulled out his laptop and I almost laughed. "Did you seriously make a PowerPoint?" His ears turned red. "I'm an analyst. It's how I process things." He opened a presentation titled Financial and Emotional Implications of Divorce. Slide 1 showed statistics about divorce rates. Slide 2 broke down shared assets. By slide 5, covering the average cost of divorce proceedings in Oregon, I was struggling not to smile. "David, this is very thorough, but..." "He's been calling me at 2 a.m., he blurted out, abandoning his presentation. "Every night since Thursday. Crying. Miles doesn't cry. Not when Dad died. Not when the first startup failed. But now he's sobbing on my voicemail at 2 a.m. about proper pronunciation of espresso machine brands. He's grieving the idea of me, not the reality. There's a difference. He says he messed up. That Julia was just a symptom, not the disease." "I know." David closed his laptop slowly. "You seem really okay with this." "I am really okay with this. That's what concerns everyone, isn't it? That I'm not falling apart according to schedule." He sipped his coffee from the cheerful mug, looking uncomfortable. "Mom's flying in tomorrow." "Your mom already called." "I handled it." "No, your mom. She called me when she couldn't reach you." My stomach dropped. Of course she had. The next morning I was back at work trying to focus on medication rounds when Caroline pulled me aside. "You have a visitor in the lobby." My mother would have gone straight to the apartment. This was someone else. I walked down to find Julia perched on one of the waiting room chairs, designer heels tapping nervously against linoleum. She looked smaller here, out of place among the worried families and harsh hospital lighting. "I need 5 minutes, she said, standing when she saw me. "I'm working. Please. I know I have no right to ask, but please." I led her to the cafeteria, bought myself a coffee I didn't want, just to have something to do with my hands. She sat across from me, her practiced speech visible in the way she straightened her shoulders. "I'm not that kind of woman," she began. "What kind is that?" "The kind who breaks up marriages." "You didn't break up anything that wasn't already broken." Her composure cracked slightly. "Nothing physical happened. You said that in your text. But emotional things did happen. Conversations. Connection." She twisted her rings, designer bands that probably cost more than my monthly salary. "I thought he was unhappy. He seemed so lost." "He was lost. In his own ego. In his need to be admired. You provided that." "I didn't mean..." "Julia, what did you think would happen? Really? That you'd have deep emotional conversations forever without consequence? That I'd just keep existing in the background while you two connected over revolutionary business strategies?" She flinched. "He said you were growing apart." "We were. Because he was growing toward you. I told him to work on his marriage. Multiple times. Before or after the late-night conversations about your shared vision?" She stood abruptly. "I wanted you to know I'm transferring to the Chicago office." "Running away? Starting fresh? Like you are." She paused at the cafeteria entrance. "Can I ask you something? Would you take him back?" "No. Even if he changed?" "He'd be changing for the wrong reasons. To get me back, not to be better. There's a difference." She left, her heels clicking down the hallway like a countdown timer. I finished my unwanted coffee and went back to my patients, people whose hearts actually wanted to be saved. That afternoon my phone rang with an unknown number. Mrs. Bennett? This is Dr. Patricia Reeves. Your husband booked an emergency couples counseling session for tomorrow at 2. We're not a couple anymore, Dr. Reeves. Oh. Pause. He seemed quite urgent about it. He mentioned you were having a temporary disagreement. It's not temporary. We're getting divorced. I see. Her professional composure slipped slightly. May I be candid? He sounded quite dysregulated when he called. Perhaps individual therapy would be more beneficial. That's an excellent suggestion. You should tell him that. I will. Ms. Crawford. Miss Crawford, you sound remarkably centered. Are you seeing someone for support? Yes. Myself. For the first time in years. I just gotten home when my mother's car pulled up outside. I watched from the window as she unloaded 2 casserole dishes and a judgment face I could see from 4 floors up. She let herself in with her spare key, stopping short at the coral wall. Adeline Marie Crawford, what have you done? Redecorated. She set down the casseroles and began her inspection, pointing at empty spaces. Where's the espresso machine? Miles took it. The smart TV? Also Miles. The sound system? I pulled out my phone, showing her our bank statements from the last 3 years. 87% of our joint purchases were paid for by me. He contributed 13%, mostly to things with his name on them or that impressed his colleagues. She studied the numbers, her finger following the transactions. You paid for your own anniversary presents? Usually. He'd forget, then reimburse me later. Sometimes. She sat down heavily on my rearranged couch. Eugene is a 3-hour drive. You couldn't have called me yourself. To say what? That I finally stood up for myself? That I'm done pretending everything's fine? To say you needed your mother. But I didn't. That's what everyone can't seem to grasp. I don't need saving or intervention or casseroles. I need people to trust that I know what I'm doing. She looked around the apartment, seeing it maybe for the first time as mine instead of ours. The coral is nice, she admitted quietly. Brings out the light. Mom stayed for dinner, both of us eating her casserole in comfortable silence. She left the second one in my freezer, kissed my forehead like I was 12 again, and drove back to Eugene without trying to fix anything else. That night I slept better than I had in months. 3 weeks passed in a blur of work shifts and small freedoms. I bought curtains Miles would have hated. Started reading again. Remembered what my own laugh sounded like. Then Caroline cornered me during shift change with that look she got when she had gossiped too good to keep. So I saw your ex last night, she said, pretending to organize already organized charts. Oh. At that pretentious wine bar on Pearl Street. With a brunette who looked like she'd rather be getting a root canal. Julia. Had to be. He was leaning in trying to talk to her and she was just scrolling her phone. Didn't even look up when he ordered. Caroline's eyes sparkled with vindication. Karma's a beautiful thing, isn't it? I waited for satisfaction to hit. Instead I felt an unexpected wave of sadness. Not for us, not for what we'd lost, but for Miles. For the man who'd been so afraid of being ordinary that he'd destroyed everything real in pursuit of something that glittered from a distance. That's just sad, I said. Caroline looked surprised. You're not happy about it? Why would I be happy watching someone I once loved be miserable? Even if he earned it. That afternoon I decided to tackle the closet. The last frontier of Miles's presence. Behind winter coats I never wore I found a box I'd forgotten existed. His old journals from when we first met, some ties he'd never worn, and at the bottom, a leather notebook I didn't recognize. I shouldn't have opened it. But I did. The entries were from 5 years ago, right after his first promotion. His handwriting, usually so precise, was frantic in places. Adeline saved someone's life today. Literally restarted a heart with her hands. I sold software to people who don't need it. How do I compete with that? Another entry. She never makes me feel small, but I feel small next to her. He's so steady. So sure. What happens when she realizes she married down? And the one that stopped my breath. I love her so much it terrifies me. What if she figures out I'm ordinary? What if she leaves? Maybe if I leave first emotionally, it won't hurt as much when she goes. I sat on the closet floor, surrounded by donated clothes and tax receipts, understanding finally that Miles hadn't fallen out of love with me. He'd fallen out of love with himself. And instead of working on that, he'd sought validation from someone who didn't know him well enough to see through his performance. Julia saw the successful consultant. I saw the man who had panic attacks about client presentations. Julia saw confidence. I saw the boy who still sought his mother's approval at 37. She understood his facade. I understood his foundation. And that terrified him more than losing me. My phone buzzed. Unknown number, but the message preview showed a law firm's name. The courier arrived an hour later with a manila envelope that felt heavier than its actual weight. Inside, divorce papers with Miles's signature already in place. His lawyer's note was brief. Mr. Bennett wishes to expedite proceedings. He's agreed to all your terms. All my terms. I hadn't even submitted terms yet. I spread the papers on my kitchen table, the same table where we'd shared 10 years of morning coffee. His signature looked shaky, unlike his usual precise script. He'd given me everything. The apartment. The savings. Even things I hadn't asked for. It felt like reading a suicide note written in legalese. I signed my name with the same steady hand I used for death certificates at work. Another ending documented, witnessed, filed away. The ink dried quickly, dark blue against white paper, official and irreversible. 2 days later I ran into Paul at the grocery store. Miles's best friend since college, the one who'd been his best man, who'd sworn Harper would be good for him. He was buying frozen pizzas and beer, the universal shopping list of a man housing a heartbroken friend. Adeline. He looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Hi. Paul. We stood there between the frozen vegetables and ice cream, neither knowing how to navigate this. He's staying with me, he said finally. On my couch. That's good. He shouldn't be alone. Paul laughed, but it was bitter. Julia kicked him out. Well, not kicked out since they weren't living together, but she told him she needs space to process. Funny how that works. I said nothing. What was there to say? He cries, you know, Paul continued like he needed to tell someone. Every night. Looking at your wedding photos on his phone. He keeps saying he destroyed everything for someone who doesn't even like him that much. She liked the idea of him. And he liked the idea of being understood without having to actually be vulnerable. Paul shifted his basket of bachelor food. He knows it's too late. Knows he can't fix this. But Adeline. I've never seen him like this. It's like he finally woke up and realized what he had. Sometimes people need to lose something to understand its value. That's cold. No, I said, selecting the good ice cream, the kind Miles always said was too expensive. That's honest. And honesty is what was missing all along. Paul studied me for a moment. You look good. Happy. I'm getting there. He won't bother you. I made him promise. But he wanted me to tell you if I saw you that he's sorry. Really sorry. Not expecting anything, sorry, just sorry. I nodded, paid for my ice cream, and left Paul standing there with his frozen pizzas and the weight of his friend's regret. That night I sat on my balcony with the good ice cream and my phone. I pulled up our wedding photos, the ones I'd hidden in a folder months ago. We looked so young, so certain. Miles's smile reached his eyes in a way I hadn't seen in years. I was looking at him like he hung the moon. Maybe he had once. Before he got scared of heights and climbed back down. I deleted the folder. Not out of anger but out of kindness. To both of us. Some things needed to stay buried for new things to grow. The empty photo folder stared back at me from my phone screen. Where 10 years of memories had lived, now just blank space. I closed the app and set the phone aside, finishing my ice cream as Portland's lights twinkled below like promises I was finally ready to make to myself. 6 months later I stood on a different rooftop, champagne flute in hand, the same city spread beneath me but everything else transformed. Sophie and Caroline had insisted on celebrating my promotion to head of cardiac unit at the exact spot where Miles had proposed 11 years ago. The irony wasn't lost on any of us. To Adeline, Sophie raised her glass, who saved her own heart with the same precision she saves everyone else's. To not needing anyone to understand us, Caroline added, her voice carrying the weight of her own divorce 3 years prior. To choosing ourselves, I said, and we clinked glasses as the sun set over the city. The rooftop bar had been renovated since Miles's proposal. New furniture, new lighting, even a new name. But the view remained the same. Mount Hood in the distance, the river cutting through downtown, the bridges lit up like jewelry. I remembered standing in this exact spot 23 years old, saying yes to a man who promised me forever. Now at 34 I was saying yes to myself. You know what the best part is? Caroline said after her second glass. You look 10 years younger. I'm not even exaggerating. It's like you shed a whole decade of exhaustion with those divorce papers. She wasn't wrong. My face had changed. The permanent furrow between my eyebrows had smoothed. The tight line of my mouth had softened. I'd started wearing lipstick again, the bright coral that matched my accent wall. Marcus mentioned the same thing, I said, thinking of the doorman who'd helped me move the previous week. I'd found a one-bedroom apartment 6 blocks from the hospital. Smaller than the place I'd shared with Miles, but flooded with light. I'd painted one wall sage green, another dusty rose. Plants crowded every windowsill, potholes and snake plants, and a massive monstera that was already outgrowing its corner. The furniture was all mine, chosen for comfort over impressiveness. Marcus had helped carry boxes, his professional discretion finally cracking when he saw how different I looked. Miss Crawford, forgive me for saying, but you're glowing, he'd said, setting down a box of books. Then quieter, Mr. Bennett still drives by sometimes. Parks across the street, looks up at the old apartment. I don't think he knows you moved. Let him look, I'd said, arranging my grandmother's china in new cabinets. He's looking for someone who doesn't exist anymore. 2 weeks into living in my new space, on what would have been our 11th anniversary, my phone buzzed with a text from Miles. I saw the preview. I understand now. What I was looking for was. I screenshot it without reading the rest and sent it to the group chat with Sophie and Caroline. Sophie responded immediately with laughing emojis. Caroline wrote, "Karma's employee of the month right there." I archived the message unread. Some words come too late to matter, like CPR on a patient who's been gone too long. You can go through the motions, but you can't bring back what's already moved on. That night I worked a shift in the cardiac unit I now ran. The same fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The same vending machine stood guard in the break room. But everything felt different when you were building instead of escaping. I was updating charts when I noticed her. The new nurse, Amy, sitting alone in the break room at midnight, staring at her phone with that familiar look of someone pretending everything was fine. "Long night?" I asked, grabbing a coffee. She startled, quickly darkening her phone screen. "Oh, Dr. Crawford. Yes, Mr. Peterson in 302 is being difficult." "That's not what's making you look like that." She laughed, but it was hollow. "My husband's working late again. 3rd time this week. He's in tech, says it's normal, but your gut says otherwise." Her eyes filled with tears. She quickly blinked away. "I'm being paranoid." I sat down across from her, remembering my own midnight vigils in this same room. "Can I tell you something? The night my marriage ended, I was standing right here. My ex-husband sent me a text saying he'd found someone who understood him better. You know what I did?" "What?" "I told him to stay with her. Best decision I ever made." Amy's eyes widened. "You just ended it? That simply?" Ending it was simple. The 10 years of pretending that led up to it, that was the hard part. The working late, the growing distance, the feeling like you're going crazy for noticing what everyone else pretends not to see. That's the real killer. But what if I'm wrong? What if he really is just working? I leaned back, studying her tired face. Then having an honest conversation won't hurt anything. But in my experience, when your gut screams this loud, it's usually right. The question is, do you want to spend years gathering evidence, or do you want to trust yourself now? She sat with that for a moment. "Were you scared when you ended it?" "Terrified. But you know what scared me more? The thought of spending another 10 years waiting for someone to see me while I disappeared. Understanding yourself, Amy, is more important than being understood by someone else. And sometimes when someone tells you not to call them, literally or figuratively, the best response is simply, "Okay, I won't." Amy nodded slowly, something shifting in her expression. "My mom always said not all endings are failures." Your mom's right. Some endings are victories disguised as losses. Sometimes the greatest revenge is just choosing to thrive. I stood up, my coffee cold but my purpose warm. Whatever you decide, remember, you're allowed to choose yourself. It's not selfish. It's necessary. Walking back onto the floor, I passed the cardiac monitors, each one tracking a heart's rhythm. Some steady, some struggling, all fighting to keep going. Just like us. The only difference was that human hearts could choose their own rhythm once they stopped letting others set the pace. I thought about Miles, probably lying awake somewhere, finally understanding what he'd lost. About Julia, discovering that understanding someone's ambition isn't the same as knowing their soul. About Marcus watching a man return to stare at empty windows. About my mother finally seeing her daughter bloom. But mostly I thought about myself. The woman who didn't fall apart when her marriage ended with 20 words. Who signed divorce papers with the same steady hand that saved lives. Who painted her walls impossible colors and bought the good ice cream and learned that being alone wasn't lonely when you actually liked your own company. I looked at my reflection in the dark window of the medication room. Coral lipstick still perfect after an 8-hour shift. Eyes clear and focused. The ghost of a smile that had become permanent these past few months. This was what thriving looked like. Not grand gestures or dramatic revenge. Just a woman who'd finally stopped waiting for someone else to understand her and decided to understand herself instead. And that understanding, that was worth more than 53 missed calls, more than midnight apologies, more than 10 years of trying to be someone's everything while slowly becoming nothing. The greatest revenge I'd learned wasn't making them sorry. It was making yourself whole. If this story of standing up for yourself had you cheering for Adeline, hit that like button right now. My favorite part was when she typed, "Then stay with her. Don't come back," with surgeon steady hands. What was your most satisfying moment? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more empowering stories like this. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Never miss an upload. Never miss an upload. Never miss an upload. Never miss an